Putin threatens to unleash Oreshnik missiles on UK and US in retaliation for Storm Shadow attack. In a dramatic escalation of global tensions, Russian President Vladimir Putin has issued a stark warning, threatening to deploy the Oreshnik missiles against the United Kingdom and the United States. This announcement comes in response to what Moscow perceives as Western aggression through the supply of advanced weaponry to Ukraine, specifically the UK-supplied Storm Shadow missiles that have been instrumental in countering Russian military operations. This move signals an alarming shift in the geopolitical landscape, as the conflict in Ukraine continues to draw in greater involvement from global powers. Putin's remarks reflect a growing frustration in the Kremlin over what it views as direct interference in a regional conflict, transforming it into a larger proxy war between NATO and Russia. The origins of the crisis, the conflict in Ukraine, which began with Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014 and escalated into a full-scale invasion in February 2022, has become one of the most significant geopolitical crises of the 21st century. In response to Russia's aggression, Western nations, led by the US, UK, and the European Union, have provided military, financial, and humanitarian aid to Ukraine. This support includes a range of advanced weapons systems, including the long-range Storm Shadow cruise missiles provided by the UK. The Storm Shadow missiles have played a critical role in Ukraine's counteroffensive operations. These long-range, precision-guided weapons have allowed Ukrainian forces to strike key Russian military installations far behind the front lines, disrupting supply chains and weakening Russia's hold on occupied territories. Their effectiveness has reportedly infuriated the Kremlin, prompting sharp rhetoric and retaliatory threats. What are the Oreshnik missiles? While the exact details of the Oreshnik missile system remain classified, Russian state media and defense analysts have described it as part of Russia's next-generation arsenal. The Oreshnik is believed to be a hypersonic missile capable of evading advanced missile defense systems, including those deployed by NATO allies. It is said to possess the capability to deliver a devastating payload over intercontinental ranges, making it a serious threat to both the UK and the US. Russia's hypersonic weapons program has been a source of pride for the Kremlin, with officials frequently touting these systems as evidence of Russia's technological and military superiority. The deployment of such a weapon would represent a significant escalation in the conflict, potentially drawing NATO directly into the fray. The Kremlin's justification: in his statement, Putin accused the West of crossing red lines by supplying Ukraine with offensive weapons capable of striking deep into Russian-held territory. The actions of the United States and the United Kingdom are nothing less than a declaration of war by proxy, Putin said during a televised address. If they continue to arm Kyiv with weapons that threaten our sovereignty and security, we will respond with the full force of our capabilities. The Kremlin has long argued that NATO's support for Ukraine is part of a broader effort to weaken Russia and expand Western influence. By framing the conflict as a struggle against Western imperialism, Moscow seeks to rally domestic and international support for its actions. Western response: the UK and US have strongly condemned Putin's threats, reaffirming their commitment to supporting Ukraine. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak called the threats unacceptable and reckless, emphasizing that the UK's support for Ukraine would not waver. Similarly, US President Joe Biden stated that Russia's attempts at intimidation would not deter the international community from standing with Ukraine. Both nations have downplayed the likelihood of an actual strike, describing Putin's rhetoric as an attempt to sow fear and division among NATO allies. However, the possibility of escalation has prompted renewed discussions about the need for robust deterrence measures. Global implications: the threat of deploying Oreshnik missiles has raised alarm bells across the globe, with experts warning of the catastrophic consequences of such an action. If Russia were to target NATO member states, it would invoke Article 5 of the NATO Treaty, which considers an attack on one member as an attack on all. This could potentially lead to a full-scale war between Russia and NATO, a scenario that would have devastating implications for global security. The economic fallout of such an escalation would also be severe. The ongoing conflict in Ukraine has already disrupted global energy and food markets, contributing to inflation and economic instability worldwide. A broader conflict involving major powers would likely exacerbate these issues, plunging the global economy into a deeper crisis. Calls for de-escalation. In light of these developments, diplomatic experts are urging all parties to pursue de-escalation and dialogue. The United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has called for an immediate ceasefire and a return to negotiations, warning that the current trajectory risks spiraling into a catastrophic conflict. China, which has sought to position itself as a mediator in the conflict, has also urged restraint. Beijing has maintained close ties with Moscow while also advocating for a peaceful resolution to the crisis. However, Western nations remain skeptical of China's intentions. viewing its neutrality as largely symbolic. Public reaction to Putin's threats has been mixed. In Russia, state-controlled media have amplified the rhetoric, portraying the Oreshnik missiles as a symbol of national strength and a deterrent against Western aggression. Meanwhile, in the West, the threats have been met with a mix of defiance and concern, with many citizens questioning the wisdom of further escalation. Protests against the war have continued in major cities across Europe and the United States, with demonstrators calling for increased diplomatic efforts to end the conflict. In Ukraine, the mood remains resolute, with citizens and leaders alike vowing to continue their fight for sovereignty and independence. The road ahead. As the conflict in Ukraine enters its second year, the stakes have never been higher. The threat of Russia deploying advanced weapons like the Oreshnik missiles underscores the urgency of finding a resolution to the crisis. While the international community remains divided on how best to achieve peace, one thing is clear: the consequences of failure could be catastrophic, not just for Ukraine, but for the entire world. For now, the world watches and waits, hoping that diplomacy can prevail over the drums of war.